Father Edgar, Father Joe, myself began ministry in Peru, we officiated obviously at many funerals in Spanish. In the old Spanish ritual, the rite of Christian burial, one of the introductory remarks struck me at the time and sort of impressed me very much. Loosely translated, it says, "How fortunate and blessed are we Christians compared to non-believers. For them, death is an ending of life. For us, it's the beginning of the fullest stage of life." For us, it truly represents not just a leaving, but more importantly, a homecoming to all we were meant and created to be. Because of our faith and the hope it offers us, we gather today, therefore, not only in sorrow for our loss, but also in the joy of believing Edgar is now living with God in His presence, completely happy and fulfilled. And because of this fact, we're happy for him, and we celebrate with him his victory with the Mass Christian resurrection. We began this ceremony today by sprinkling of Father Edgar's ashes with the holy water that recalled his baptism 88 years ago. St. Paul in his baptismal homily says, all of us who were baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death. By baptism into his death, we were buried with him, so that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, so we too might live a new life. If we have been united with him in likeness to his death, so shall we be united with him by likeness to his resurrection. Father Edgar was born on March 21st, 1935, in St. Peter, the son of Ted and Mary. Very shortly afterward, he was reborn in the waters of baptism. And that, for him and for each one of us, was a life-changing moment in our life. Because at that moment, Father Edgar became a son of God, a child of God. And Christ became his brother who came to dwell with him each day, to enter a lifelong love relationship with him, which we call grace. He came to be a constant companion and support with him on his journey through life here on earth. Over the years, Edgar's relationship with Christ matured, nourished by Mass, the sacraments, the religious instruction, daily prayer, through seeking to follow his master more closely, who defined his mission by saying, I've come to serve, not to be served, to give my life in service to others. Very early in life, Edgar felt the call to serve Christ in the priesthood. In 1949, he entered Runnerdale, and after attending St. Joe College and St. Mary's Novitiate, he began his last 6 years of preparation here at what was then called St. Charles Seminary. Finally, on June 9th, 1962, He was ordained to the priesthood in this very chapel, about where I'm standing now. At that time he was ordained, as we all recall, great things, changes, were occurring in the church, affected by the Vatican Council, and then for us very especially, Pope John the 23rd's appeal to religious orders to consider sending 1/10 of their personnel to serve in the missions. This was important for some of us very much. Father Edgar joyfully responded to this call and this dream, and he had always had. And he volunteered to serve in the Peruvian mission in 1965. At that time, the Peruvian mission was only 3 years old. I think the obituary for Father Edgar describes him very succinctly and well. He had a strong constitution, that he did, and a strong faith, he did, to go with it. When he served in Yali Arroyo, he took on his ministry in small, remote villages, setting out with only a few necessities. I think Father Edgar rejected the image of what he would call a rectory priest. A rectory priest was one who lived in a rectory and then went out, occasionally celebrate Mass with sacraments, and then bam, was back in the rectory. And then asked the people would come to him there. But Edgar's ministerial approach was going out to meet the people in their circumstances and their surroundings. A ministry of presence to them. And you might say, he took quite literally Christ's admonition to his 12 disciples when he sent them out on mission. I quote from Matthew 10. Do not take gold or silver or copper for your belts, no snack for the journey, or a second tunic, or sandals, or a walking stick. The laborer deserves his keep. Whatever town or village you enter, look for a worthy person in it, and stay there until you leave. I think Edgar took this very literally. I think Christ is probably using a little bit of overstatement, but he says, do what's important. Don't get lost in details of and how you're going to pack. But I can remember when Father Edgar go out for a couple days, or a week, a pillowcase, a change of underwear, a towel, and very little else, a shirt. That's about it. And a couple gallons of water. Made sure the car was filled with gas, extra tire because the roads were very bad, and he'd take off, and he trusted the Lord. He lived very simply. That's a little unnerving for the rest of us. You go out, you think, do you have reservations? There's no hotels. As a matter of fact, the roads were a lot, the super highways where we were less than country dirt roads. Sometimes there were just tire marks in the field. And you go for days that way to meet people. But he was also, in a very literal sense, a very much C.PP.S. community person. And he really felt the necessity of getting together when we're in town like that. And now he lived in the town of Morococha. which is at about 14,500 foot level. Lived with Father Geraldo Smith. And he would be out in his campo during the week visiting. And so both of them would come down on Sunday night, and the rest of us came in. And at that time was Joe Henders, Father Gay Dreiling, Bill Buse, and I. And we'd have a big thing. Of course, we had a few pisco sours. And we also just had a lot of fun together, kidded each other. And just a wonderful, play cards, of course, poker it was. And so it was a very community. It was very important for Edgar. He just loved it. As I mentioned last night, we used to pull tricks on each other too. You know, that was part of it. You never knew what was going to happen to you because we get each other back, you know. But it kept life interesting. It was a good community. And he had a lot of favorite quotes. We call them garisms. He says, he would look and we'd been talking, in the old days in the community, we had a lot of folklore about the priests that had gone before, the priests and brothers. And, you know, we shared it in our stories while we were in the SEM and things like that. And Edgar says, oh, it's too bad the age of characters in our society's gone. And we'd roll our eyes as we haven't noticed it. But Edgar was a character in a very good sense of that term. Every now and then I can still remember when we would go out, the people in my campo, the area I worked in, as well as the one that Edgar ministered to, the older people pretty well spoke Quechua. They didn't speak too much Spanish, but neither did we. We didn't speak much Quechua. But on the other hand, I can always remember him just saying it. He'd greet all the older people, the younger people out there. You'd greet them in Spanish. The older people, I still remember him saying, "Imbasutiki, my matakanki." He said, "What's your name? Where are you from?" And I heard that so many times, I think I could never forget it. So the rest of us all learned those two phrases because he said it so much. When, at that very point, I mentioned before the Vatican Council had taken place, and then in 1965, the year Edgar arrived in Peru, the Latin American Episcopal Conference, CELAM, met in Medellin, Colombia, and they said how they were going to implement the Vatican II in the Latin American Church. And it was about it was called the transformation of the Church in light of the documents of Vatican II. The Church's role and presence, it says, must go beyond the proclamation of personal holiness and preaching in the sacraments. It must also address the temporal needs of the people. That's essential. Up till then, it was more of a sacramental ministry where we were all trained for and that. And so here we got to get involved in doing something about particularly the poverty that enslaved the people. It was a poverty they could not rise out of. And so we had what we call the preferential option for the poor. The church did. And we were to work to help change the social structures that enslaved people in that slavery. And it also asked, like comunidades de base, small Christian communities be formed, which Edgar really did a lot of work with. And we all got caught up in this aspiration. So it was a different ministry that occurred because of these councils. Father Edgar was a true missionary in spirit, in action, and in the way of his life. His emphasis was on outreach to the poorest and the forgotten ones. He's serving the most remote and almost inaccessible small villages, and the formation of these small faith communities, and forming lay leaders and catechists and ministers in each one of these villages that could carry on services between the scarce times that we could make each of those places. So getting more lay involvement, that was a new thing too. He was very instrumental, and I think in doing that, and he left a tremendous legacy for the priests and those to follow down in, particularly in Peru. Now, with the exception of a several-year interlude ministering in the United States, he was up here in 1973 to 78. He ministered in South America until he had an accident, a terrible accident in Lima in 1993, and had to return to the States. But he bounced back for a while and even went down to Mexico to help for about a 10-year period. Then in 2013, Father Edgar came here to St. Charles to live. And for the past few years, he's been pretty much confined to his room in the infirmary. As I visited him, pastor's rooms, and many other occasions also, I often wonder, that for Edgar, who had been so very active, to find himself sort of sedimentary, I wonder if he just could not have made his own the words of St. Paul. As he was confined to prison after a very active ministry, as we know, and he wrote to his close friend, Timothy, he says, "I'm already being poured out like a libation, and the time of my departure is at hand. I have competed well. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. From now on, a crown of righteousness awaits me, which the Lord, just judge, will award to me on that day, not only to me, but on all who have longed for his appearance. But the Lord stood by me and gave me strength, so that the proclamation of the gospel might be completed, and all the Gentiles might hear it. To him be glory forever and ever." In today's gospel reading, we hear Jesus making that remarkable promise for his friend. He said, "I'm going to prepare a place for you, and then I'm going to come back to take you with me." And just a short time after we celebrated Easter, on Sunday, that Sunday, Christ came early the next morning to lead Edgar to the place he had prepared for him and the reward he so justly deserved.